Agent Carter, Week 7, Snafu. Perhaps a weak title, but a very entertaining episode. We are almost to the end here, folks. Only one more week to go. Next week will be the season, perhaps the series finale. There's no word yet on a season 2 or if there's going to be any continuation, which is disappointing because I don't see next week. They certainly wouldn't have built it up next week to have Peggy take over and create S.H.I.E.L.D. Not enough time to do that. So I was originally satisfied with an 8-episode miniseries that told the story of how she went from being a low-level agent in SSR to becoming the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., but didn't happen in 8 episodes, so now I am hopeful for a season 2. Not the least of which, for the reason that I am enjoying discussing this with you every week. I appreciate the feedback, I appreciate the support, and it has been fun talking about this and analyzing the series. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and I'm sad it's almost over. But hopefully there will be a season 2. I think the ratings and the feedback has been high enough, so maybe we will see Haley Atwell back again for Agent Carter Season 2. But for tonight, it's Snafu. It is Week 7, and before the episode, I read an interesting interview with Bridget Regan, who of course plays Little Dottie Underwood from Iowa. And when she went in for the audition, she had red hair, and she obviously nailed the audition. And they had her dye her hair blonde because they didn't want, us as viewers to think that every Black Widow has red hair. She didn't know at the time she was going to be a Black Widow. She later met with Kevin Feige from Marvel, who let her in on the secret and said, told her a little bit about the character's backstory. And when she had done the audition, she remembered certain things about the character's upbringing and some flashbacks and things that really raised some interesting questions. And when she found out she was going to be a Black Widow, she was obviously beyond happy because that's a major part in this cinematic universe. To be, second, not even second, to be the precursor to Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff is quite the honor, I would say, and she took it as such. So it was a really good article. I suggest you check it out. It's just the Bridget Regan interview. So we begin tonight's episode in Russia, 1943, and we see in an army hospital Dr. Ivchenko, and they've run out of anesthetic, and they know that he has a way of making someone feel no pain. So they know that, obviously his research was familiar to those people there at the army hospital, and they bring him in because they have to amputate a soldier's leg, and they have no anesthetic, and they want to try to save his life. So he doesn't have the ring. I didn't see him with that ring yet, which we will talk about in a minute. I have some thoughts on that ring. And no, it has nothing to do with the Mandarin, but that would be interesting. But he just has the soldier focus and think about a time he was happy, and he has this really beautiful story about playing chess with his mother, and they're playing chess outside because it's better this way, yes? And I think he was playing her to a stalemate, is what was implied, because he said he made the game last forever. And of course the mother got wise to him and said, you can't stop time. She said something like that. And it was a really beautiful scene. It was really idyllic in the scenery, and it shows him kind of in this perfect moment, and he's looking up at the ceiling as they saw his leg off with this really rusty looking saw, and it just makes you think of just even 60, 70 years ago, the medical technology they had in these field hospitals was just horrific. If you've ever read anything about like the Civil War and what those soldiers went through, it is horrific. So this scene was shot really well. It was really powerful, and it was interesting backstory for Dr. Ivchenko. So Ivchenko and Dooley are watching Sousa interrogate Peggy, and now this is right where we started, where we ended last week with this interrogation. And Thompson's questioning, why is Ivchenko here? It's a little bit of a breach of protocol, and Dooley's under his spell. He says, don't worry about it. This is my guy. So Ivchenko excuses himself. He says, I don't think she's going to talk about Leviathan. I'm not going to be of any help. I don't want to cause stress between you and your agents. So Sousa is painting this picture for Peggy with this mountain of evidence he has against her. The photos at Spider Raymond's club, the eyewitnesses that place her with the truck of nitramine, the eyewitness that places her on the boat where they found the Stark Tech when she was with Jarvis. And, these small characters who, we remember from previous episodes are actually looming large now, even though they're not appearing in person, but they are placing her in places where she really shouldn't be. And there's a really great, like a montage scene where Thompson, Dooley, and Sousa are all interrogating her in sort of different ways. It's not quite good cop, bad cop, but it's along those lines. And it was really well shot. It was really well done. Sousa is really, really hurt because, as we've discussed before, he's the only one there who tried to reach out to her and to understand her. And she's the only one who really tried to befriend him. He's not taken seriously by Thompson and the other agents because of his leg. And, of course, she's not taken seriously. So they, as we've discussed many times, have a strong bond. So he feels more betrayed. He feels even more betrayed than Peggy felt when, Howard betrayed her. So he's personally hurt by this. And even though he couldn't, this is actually part of the reason he couldn't bring himself to shoot her, because he does have feelings for her, and he's carrying a torch for her. And it's interesting that Peggy's identity is not based on her relationship with men, like many weakly written female characters can be. But in this case, it's Sousa who's carrying the flame for her, and is Sousa the some guy who she actually ends up marrying? We don't know yet. I have a suspicion. I mean, it's clear. Anyone who's watching the show would have had the same thought. And if we do go to season 2, is he a red herring, or do we find out who is the future Mr. Carter? And yes, I said Mr. Carter, because that's the way it should be. So Sousa says to her, I had your back for 6 months while you were waiting to put a knife in mine. Harsh words, and that's got to cut Peggy, that he would think that of her, but she understands because there is a mountain of evidence. So she cuts him right back, and I thought this was a little bit cruel of her. Says, hey, Sousa, I understand that no one here takes you seriously. They don't let you run with the ball this far, so you're going to make the most of it. And basically she's accusing him of showing off for Dooley, really letting her have it when it's not necessary. And he knows it's not necessary or warranted. So she digs at him, basically saying, no one takes you seriously here, so you don't need to make a show. You don't need to show off. And I thought that was a little low of her, but where she was there emotionally, it was in character. So Dooley is absolutely wrapped around Ivchenko's finger, and, there's the scene, well, we'll get to this in a minute, the scene with Ivchenko and Dooley. It gets really weird very quickly, and it gets really powerful. So they're all doing the interrogation, and they're saying, Stark's left you out to dry. Why do you still have his back? And no one believes her. And it reminded me, I've been watching a lot of Better Call Saul lately. I'm going to try to do another video on that later. But I'll try to do no spoilers because I don't want to spoil that for anyone. But there's a situation where he knows something's true. No one believes him. They think he's involved in something, and he can't tell the truth. And it just really reminded me of this particular scene where they're saying, why are you protecting this person? They've left you out to dry, but they can't say the reason why. They're just saying, you have to believe me. And in both cases, only one person believes them. But anyway, we'll talk about Better Call Saul another time. If you haven't seen it yet, it is excellent. Back to Agent Carter. So she dresses down in this order: Dooley, Thompson, and Sousa. Really deliberately, very accurately. She's like a surgeon with a scalpel, and she says, to Dooley, I'm just a stray kitten that you think needs protection. And to Thompson, she says, I'm a secretary. You treat me like a secretary turned damsel in distress. And to Sousa, I'm the girl you put on a pedestal, and now you've turned me into a daft whore. Because now, of course, she's accusing him of being with Howard Stark and being so stupid that she fell for his plan and she should just come clean. And none of that's true, but she's letting them have it because for the past few weeks, we know they don't take her seriously. And she's basically saying, this whole time, you never listened to me. This is why I had to do my own investigation, because no one takes me seriously. There's a great quote later where she says, oh yeah, unless I have your reports, your coffee, or your lunch, I'm invisible to you. I'll circle back to that in a minute. So she says, you were inches away from the person you wanted. It's Dottie. So we cut to Dottie, and she's buying a baby carriage, and she goes with the pink blanket. And the woman says, you don't seem like you're very far along. And she says, it's sooner than you think. Foreshadowing that whatever plan she's cooking up with Leviathan is about to come to fruition. Why does she need a baby carriage? Even, if you've seen the episode, you know why she needs it. But even now looking back, did she really need that? Could she just drop the canister on the ground? A little showy for me. It was a little bit of showmanship I didn't think was necessary. It's a good way to transport this canister. I don't know how heavy it was. But don't know that she needed the baby carriage. So, right here, this was a great scene where Peggy is handcuffed, no one believes her, no one wants to listen to her, and Jarvis walks right into SSR. And this woman, who is the sort of head receptionist here, I don't know, is this a real switchboard where they're working? Or is it really just for show? Are these people all paid by the SSR and it's a fake switchboard? Or I don't think so. But this person has a gun under the desk. And Jarvis walks in and says, I'm here to see Agent Dooley. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's reaching for the gun under the desk. And he says, I have the signed confession of Howard Stark. So she picks up the phone and she gets Agent Dooley on the line. So he goes in and he says to them, Howard Stark will be here, I think he says at 9 p.m. He's in Sweden right now and he's going to land in Teterboro at 9 p.m. And we're going to have his lawyers have the signature page. And, the deal is, once Stark turns himself in and they have that signature, Jarvis and Peggy will be free to go. And Dooley means forever, that Peggy will no longer be an agent. He doesn't even want her around, even though Stark's confession will prove her innocent of any wrongdoing or treason. He doesn't trust her anymore. And even he feels a little bit betrayed too, because he started to believe in her the last week or two. And now he feels that that's been thrown back in his face. So, Dooley, for some reason, finds Jarvis repulsive. Those two have not gotten along the entire series. And now Peggy's been fired. Peggy's offended that even after everything they've seen her do, everything they know about her, her war record, what she did in Russia when they found Evchenko, what she's even done for them lately, and what they think of her, they still think she's a doe-eyed idiot succumbed to the charms of America's mustachioed Casanova. They can't even imagine that she's anything but just one of Stark's girls who got kind of strung along by him and mixed up in one of his schemes here, which is really insulting. So here is the scene that we talked about before with Dooley and his wife. Now, Dooley has felt for a while, he's had a really good character arc, and he's been hinting the last few weeks that we know he's had marriage problems, and he's estranged from his wife. I'm not sure if they're officially separated. I don't know how much they touch on it. But Evchenko is using his powers that we saw at the very beginning with the Russian soldier, saying, picture what you want to have happen, and you need to focus. And he calls his wife and says, can we just have dinner? Can we just talk? I want to come home. And she says, okay. He says, I need you to do one more thing for me. So he is standing at the window and he's doing the dots and the dashes. He's doing the Morse code. And of course, Dottie's still up in the window reading it off. And what he says is, prepare for evacuation, 90 minutes, Leviathan is coming. And we cut to commercial. Really ominous words. Now, I want to ask a question. Leviathan is coming in 90 minutes. They didn't come, right? They didn't come today. I know later he says there's a change of plans and they need to test it, and the movie theater was the test, but who was coming? And we'll find out next week, but were there a whole bunch of operatives coming, a whole bunch of Black Widows, or more scientists, or soldiers, or what? What does he mean by Leviathan is coming? Other than Ivchenko and Dottie, we haven't seen Leviathan personified in present day. So I'm very curious next week if they arrive in force or if we see their leader. Is there a head to this snake? We don't know. We will find out, I hope. That's something I hope for next week, is that we find out does Leviathan have a leader? And what presence will they actually have in New York? So Carter, in a brilliant move, spills everything. Now, why would she do this? Because she sees Ivchenko communicating, and she knows, and actually Jarvis knows enough Morse code. She writes down the dots and the dashes, and he just looks and reads it. That'd be something I'd love to be able to do. It's not a form of communication that's used very much these days. It's not as useful as swiping, but it is something that would be interesting. Just look at those dots and dashes and just read it. I'm always impressed in like submarine movies when the guys get the headphones and he just hears it, and he's just writing down the letters. It's really cool to me. So I digress. She needs them to believe her because she knows this is very important. The fact that Ivchenko is a traitor has duly wrapped around, his finger, and literally his ring finger, and he knows that she's working, that he's working with Dottie. So she needs them to believe that. The only way she knows how is to spill everything. So she sits down, gets some popcorn, boys, because she's going to tell you the whole story. She goes back to Spider Raymond's club. She talks about Leet Branis. She probably tells them all about Green Suit and the nitramine bomb and the whole thing. And, sorry, my throat's really dry. He eventually, she tells him the entire story, and, starts with Howard Stark's confession. It's fake. It's not real. And they correctly deduce that Howard Stark was her way out of there. And they correctly deduced that if it was fake, he wasn't going to show up anyway, so she was going to jail no matter what. So that the fact that she would actually, blow up their plan doesn't prove anything. But I think it was Thompson who actually says that something doesn't fit here. The woman who saved my life in Russia, she wouldn't have killed Kosminski. It just doesn't add up. And Sousa says, I believe her. And Dooley says, I don't, but I trust Sousa's gut. That's the respect that that Dooley has for his guys. And Sousa finally gets the respect he deserves. Dooley says, I trust your gut. And if you believe her, we're going to explore this. So he goes back into the room, and this I love this scene. He says, would you mind closing the window? And right there, Ivchenko knows. He knows that they're exposed. He knows that the cover's blown. It's getting a little cool in here. He knows. So Ivchenko says, he's just happy to be there, and he tricks Dooley. Dooley shouldn't have left his guard open like that. He wasn't expecting the ring hypnotism thing, but he should have been looking for something. If he knows, he should have immediately put him into custody. But instead, I think he wanted to test him and see where he was going to go with this. But he leaves himself open and allows Ivchenko to hypnotize him. There was a sense of dread this entire episode that one of the main characters was going to get killed. Some of the other sort of people I've talked to and people I watched the episode with were saying, oh, they thought it might have been Sousa. It can't be Sousa. If there's going to be a season 2, Sousa's going to be a main character. Love interest for Peggy. Sousa's going nowhere. Could have been Thompson. Thompson had enough of a redeeming character arc. He redeemed himself enough that his death would have had weight. But it's not going to be Thompson. I started thinking, could it be Dooley? Is he going to have him have a scotch and walk out in front of a truck just like he did with the agent whose name I can't remember last week? So he starts saying, picture this dinner. Picture what's going to happen when you get home. Scene right before that I forgot to touch on was just as Peggy's spilling everything. She has to explain that tech that she stole, and she opens it up, and he says, what's this? Does it implode, explode? Do I pour it into an old-fashioned? Great line, by the way. And she says, that's Steve Rogers' blood. And the way that Thompson and Sousa react, they're kind of, they kind of go from kind of to, and they're kind of looking at each other and looking at it, and Dooley's holding it, and then all of a sudden when he knows what it is, he's holding it with this reverence and respect. Very deserved, very appropriate, very in character, that they don't respect Peggy like they should. They're beginning to, but they respect Captain America, rightfully so. And they're holding it, Dooley's holding it with reverence, and the other two are just looking at it with, like, in awe. And she explains that correctly, that the other samples that they had, they were trying to reverse engineer it, and they destroyed it all, which was true. And for this particular sample, she said she was going to try to save the last bit of him. And that's the right thing to do. And they actually respect that, and they understand it. And that's what holds weight for them as well. The fact that, it's not just a loving souvenir. It's from that shared camaraderie and respect that they had for each other, that she wants to do the little things she can do. She couldn't save him the first time. She couldn't save him when his plane was crashing, but she can save this last little bit of him now. And it's her duty, it's her responsibility to do it. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that more. I didn't want to skip over that character beat because that was huge. So, Ivchenko was blown, and now he's using the ring on Dooley. And he remembers the time that, he would make dinner for his family, and he would carve the chicken, and it's vivid. And just like the soldier at the beginning, Ivchenko is there, and there's touches of the real world, but it's a full-on hallucination. And Dooley's right there with his family, and he really knows this is where he needs to be. So he says, you're going to go home, you're going to have this dinner, but first I need you to do something for me. And this is the end of Dooley. He locks up Carter and Jarvis at gunpoint in the interrogation room, goes to the lab, has all the guys, all the techs there, the analysts, I think they call them the eggheads, clear out. And then he retrieves, finally, item 17, which is the picture that Dottie took out of Peggy's box a few weeks ago. I was wondering what that was, what the significance was, why that picture. Now we know. And item 17 is what this has all been about. I thought they were looking for the Havoc reactor. I thought maybe they wanted Captain America's blood. Peggy still thinks that, but it's this item 17, so what the hell is it? And while he's there, he finds this vest. And it's a special kind of armor that Stark built. And when you hear Stark and armor in the same sentence, you know where your mind goes. But this wasn't overdone. It was just a little touch of what Howard was working on, and it's going to be the inspiration for Tony many, many years later. Just some of these inventions. And he says it's very fragile. Don't touch it. But he hasn't put it on. So he gets item 17, and he walks to the elevator, and Dooley says, I think I should hang on to this. His will is breaking through a little bit. Dooley's will is strong enough that there's a shred that's fighting Ivchenko's influence. And Ivchenko says, no, you're okay. I need you to focus. Just focus. Like he said to the scientist in Russia with Dum Dum Dugan. He said, I need you to listen. Focus on the sound of my voice. And he leaves. He leaves with item 17. Great scene where Thompson and Sousa and a bunch of the other agents go next door. And Ivchenko sees this, and he knows this is when he has to make his move. They go next door to try to ambush Dottie. Dottie knows that they're coming. And she's still in the dentist's office. And Sousa finds the dentist's body still sitting there with flies around it and a sheet over it. And I didn't expect Dottie to move the body, I suppose, but she could have at least torn up her notes. All the notes are there, new directive, kill Peggy Carter, and 90 minutes Leviathan is coming, and God knows what else she left there. I think she could have been a little neat. I think with all her training and everything, I think she would have been a little neater with her tracks. I think she would have covered them a little better. Small quibble I have right there. So a couple of good hand-to-hand combat scenes, nothing spectacular, but what are they going to do against her? Sousa does say, I think it was Sousa said, shoot her on sight, and no one does. They just point the gun and just stare at her. Just pull the trigger. I was yelling at my TV, pull the trigger. And the scene where she escapes down the staircase, jumping back and forth, was really cool. Again, you'd think just a couple of bullets and they could catch her. She's right there. It's not, but they don't get her. She gets away, which is fine. In the interview with Dottie, they were even asking her about her character in season 2, what she'd be doing, and it never occurred to me that she was going to survive season 1. I'm assuming next week they get her, but I wonder if that is if they slipped up and spilled that she's going to be, that she doesn't get killed, or if she's just being hopeful. I hope that's not like a major spoiler. But when they interviewed her, she said, my character in season 2, there's so many places that they can go with it. So I kind of wish I hadn't read that. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler, but the fact of the matter is I think that's just wishful thinking, because there isn't even a season 2 yet. And they can always leave the door open, like they did with, what did I watch recently? Where they left the door open. Oh, it was Doctor Who with the Master. Why couldn't they just either make it clear that she escaped or got killed? They have to leave that door open for a return. Excuse me. So she escapes. Big surprise. They weren't going to have Sousa kill Dottie. We know it's going to be Peggy versus Dottie. The whole 7 weeks is building to that final showdown, which we're going to wait to next week for. So Dottie picks up Ivchenko, and the two of them escape, and she says, is it time? And he says, no, we need to do a test first. So we cut back to Peggy and Jarvis, and they had a couple great scenes this week, and this was a really good scene with just the two of them, where they say, okay, so they're both handcuffed to a desk, and they say, we could smash that glass. How do you feel about smashing that glass? And you remember, they're both British, so they're both being very proper and polite. And we could smash that glass. Well, what if there's people on the other side? Well, there could be a spray of glass. They could be injured. Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3. Wait a minute. What if they have guns? Well, then there could be a spray of bullets and we'll be injured. Oh, okay. They smash the glass. There's no one on the other side. And they say, well, there's no one. So everyone's happy. And then she says, well, we're still handcuffed to this desk. Oh, yeah. So at that very moment, I think it was Thompson came in. And basically they say, where's Dooley? And unfortunately, fortunately, at first we cut and it seems like he made it home. Dooley made it home, and his son is painting a birdhouse, and he's talking to him, and the scene is just really, really idyllic. It's a little too perfect. Reminds me of episodes of like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you're on the holodeck, and they got to try to figure it out, and there's little problems, little clues. I'm off topic, but remember the episode where Riker has a son, and it's 30 years in the future, and that's a really good episode, and he's got to figure out. It's stories within stories, holodecks and dreams within holodecks. So there's those little clues, almost like Inception. You spin the top and it's those little things that you look for to know that you're in a dream. And his wife comes in and they embrace and they kiss. He says, can I come home? And she says, of course you can. And I'm like, oh, this is so great and so perfect. And he says, a man came in and he took this technology and I should be angry or scared, but I just don't care. And part of me's, I know it's fake, but part of me is saying maybe he really just found the piece he needs. And he's really okay with what's happening. But unfortunately, he's still hypnotized and he's at his desk with that vest on, and it's basically a suicide vest. And it's Stark tech that makes absolutely no sense. It's this armor that has a heat source and it's not stable and it's supposed to keep you warm and you can't unlock it or interact with it or take it off. A little bit of a MacGuffin for me. It kind of made no sense. Why would Stark build this? And if it's so unstable and terrible, why not destroy it? if you put it on you, it's like a death sentence. Like, why does it have to have locks on it? Why can't it just have a zipper? I didn't particularly like the vest, but I did like what they did with it. They need Dooley out of the way because you can't have him around running things because you know Peggy's taking over. SSR is going to become S.H.I.E.L.D. at some point, and she's going to be in charge. She's going to be the founder. So you can't have Dooley. I was hoping he would just retire and go home and be with his wife, but that's not his destiny, not this day. So the text can do nothing. They don't know how to get it off. Jarvis has got a lot of information, but he doesn't know how to get it off. So Dooley accepts his fate. He takes the gun, and he says to Peggy, "You promised me one thing. You get the son of a bitch who did this." I think that's what he said. I think those are his words. He might have said bastard. I don't remember. But it was a great line. You think he's going to shoot himself in the head, but then it would still explode. So, in a really cool scene, he goes running for the window, fires shots to break the glass, jumps out just as the thing overheats, and it blows up just like 10 feet away from the window, shatters all the glass in SSR. But no one gets hurt except him. Now, Dooley is gone. Definitely quite a way to go out. He went out a hero. He saved everyone's lives. He didn't flinch. He wasn't scared in the face of his own death. You know, he wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He wasn't trying to panic and take it off. Before, someone said there was a hint of panic, but this time there was no panic. That was Jarvis when he was trying to figure out how to get Peggy out. And of course, he forged the confession documents just as a ruse to buy them time because he panicked. But in this situation, Dooley did not panic. Dooley was brave, and Dooley went out a hero. And of the three, Dooley, Sousa, and Thompson, he's the one who makes most sense to die because, we need to pave the way for Peggy to take over. And maybe, depending on the events of next week, will she become the new chief? Or will the SSR be dissolved? These are questions that I have for next week. So the SSR is shattered, and Sousa comes in and says, like, what the hell happened? And Thompson says, we lost the chief. He doesn't give any more detail than that. So they say Leviathan tasked Leet Brannis to steal something. What was it? And Peggy says the blood. So they go down to the lab, and the blood is still there. It wasn't that. And they say, well, what's missing? And one of the eggheads says, item 17. And they say, well, what is it? They don't know. They have no idea what it does. Jarvis doesn't know. The lab techs don't know what it does. So we cut to a very well done, ominous, horrifying, very disturbing scene where Dottie walks in with the baby carriage and people are saying, oh, you brought a baby to a movie. And she says, I forget what she says, but she goes and she wheels the carriage over, puts it down. And there's a woman who says, don't you worry, it's okay. And she walks out and leaves the carriage behind. And I think one or two people kind of look and think that's strange, but no one really seems to notice that she's left the baby and left. Maybe she's just going to get popcorn or milk or something. It's very strange. It would raise a red flag for me. But I got to admit, if I'm sitting in a movie theater and a woman brings in a baby carriage and then walks out, I'm not going to go touch the baby carriage, especially in this day and age. You'd get sued. You can't go near the baby. Am I really going to go get the manager? I mean, you probably do nothing. You probably sit there and do nothing. Assume someone else is going to do it. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it was the Kitty Genovese syndrome. Isn't that what it's called? When you're looking out the apartment window and you think, well, someone else is going to call the police. And you just kind of don't do anything about it. It's that sort of crowd mentality. A person is smart, but people are a scared, angry mob. Speaking of a scared, angry mob, the canister in the carriage goes off, and you're probably thinking the same thing I did. It's poison gas, but it isn't. It's some kind of compound that caused apparently extreme strength and aggression. And I'm trying to think, in the Marvel Universe, is there anything like this? Maybe, the Hulk, that was gamma rays. I don't know of anything quite like that. If you do, please leave a comment and let me know, because I'm not an expert on the comics. I've read a fair amount of the comics, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on the actual comics, on the different storylines to actually recognize this compound. And it makes everyone go nuts. everyone basically beats the hell out of each other, and they beat everyone in that movie theater to death. So when this couple arguing about, oh, my husband was too cheap to pay for parking, they lived because this guy was cheap. So sometimes being thrifty has its benefits, doesn't it? They open the door, and the usher just starts screaming because there's got to be 50, 60 people all bloodied and dead. They're all dead. They beat each other to death. So now next week in the previews, it says something about Times Square, and that's obviously the end game here is to cause so much mass confusion and death that to take down New York or to take down the world. I don't to take down America. I don't know what is Leviathan's end game. So here are the questions we have for next week. Let me just make sure. Is that the end? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So what it does, no one knows. Okay. So that right there is where the episode ends. So the questions for next week, there's a lot of them. We have a lot of things that need to be wrapped up. And the fact that there's no season 2 sort of greenlit yet, they have to wrap this up in a satisfying way where in the event, the terrible event that there is no season 2, we have to be able to call this, buy this series on Blu-ray, which I definitely would because I'm enjoying it. It has to wrap up in a satisfying way without too many, loose ends and teasers and things left unanswered. So who are the voiceless? Why are they having their voice boxes cut out? What really happened at Finau and why, right? What is the Havoc reactor? Is it that canister? Is item 17 the Havoc reactor? Because we still don't know what that does. I didn't get a close enough look at the schematics to even know. What is Leviathan's master plan? Is it just to cause death? Is it a very like Ra's al Ghul kind of end of the civilization, sort of break it down and build up another one kind of thing? Or is it just a Russian plot to just take down America? Are they just simple terrorists? Does it have anything whatsoever to do with Hydra? Because of course you've seen Winter Soldier, you know that as S.H.I.E.L.D. is founded, it's pre-infiltrated by Hydra. So what's the relationship between Leviathan and Hydra? Maybe there is none. But it's a question that, you can't blame me for asking. The confrontation between Dottie and Peggy, they owe it to us to have it be epic. It should be epic. It should be, I'm hoping for 5 to 7 minutes of straight choreography. That would be great between the two of them. The move that Dottie did when she killed that smuggler, I can't remember his name, he had like a short name, where she kind of like goes off the wall and does that Natasha Romanoff kind of spin move. That was cool. I'd like to see more of that. Peggy's strength is her sharpshooting, though. It's her aim. She's good hand-to-hand, of course. Very good hand-to-hand. But her strength is obviously with guns, and Dottie's strength would be hand-to-hand. So I'm not sure how they're going to approach it. Obviously, there's a clip they showed from next week where they are fighting hand-to-hand. I know some people have commented that the fight scenes and sort of the action scenes here, certainly not big budget Hollywood, certainly not amazing groundbreaking stuff. Exciting, sure. I think it's all necessary. There's no gratuitous violence here. Any scene of violence in this show has absolutely driven the plot forward, which I do appreciate. But definitely hoping for a great confrontation there. I'm hoping that they wrap up a lot of loose ends. There's also some kind of a press conference with Howard Stark. How does Howard Stark clear his name? Obviously, Leviathan's been exposed, so most of the work is done there for him. But why is he giving a press conference? Is it a good idea with Leviathan out there looming and item 17 on the loose? Does Stark know a way to defuse item 17? A lot of questions. I could go on and on. Plenty of questions. Looking forward to next week. The episode is Valediction, which is sort of like a polite way to end a letter. It's like a closing or a salutation, but it also has another meaning where it's like the final remarks or prayers by the priest at a gravesite. That's usually the valediction for the Roman Catholics. So interesting double meaning there. So I'm wondering sort of which meaning that they're going to go with. Valediction could very simply mean It could be a play on words to validation, so we're going to have Peggy Carter and Howard Stark both cleared, and just the end of the show. It's the closing. Or is there going to be another funeral? Are we going to lose another major character? You know, maybe I see the episode ending maybe with Dooley's funeral. When it's all said and done, they go to his gravesite and they mourn, and they say, how do we move forward with SSR? And might be a good way to end the story and leave the door open for season 2. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the episode tonight. The character moments took a little bit of a backseat, but there was enough tonight. The action was good. It drove the plot forward. It left a lot of questions, but if nothing else, it left me excited to see next week's finale. Is it just 1 hour? It would be great if it was 2 hours, but it's probably just 1 hour. So we'll see you next week. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much for watching.